I know a lot of you have used Zoom already, but I just wanted to remind you that the chat you can use at your will to share your contact information, interact with other participants. You can send messages directly to me. For the most part, I'd like you to use the Q&A feature for your questions, but you're more than welcome to submit comments in the Q&A if you'd like me to read them out loud for everybody. But I'm curious to know where you're tuning in from. It does help us to know. So if you don't mind right now in the chat, letting everyone know, where are you in the world today? San Francisco, welcome, Charlie. Where else? San Francisco, great. Wilmington, great. Great, okay, a lot of San Francisco. I do want to relaunch this poll. I want to know who's here. If this poll is working for you, let me know if you're a founder, an investor, or other. Okay, we have a lot of others so far. I want to know what is, if you don't mind sharing in the chat, what is your current role? What are you doing professionally? And we do have quite a few founders here too, which I love. Thank you for being here. And whether or not you're a founder in the PropTech space or any other industry, I hope you find some of the information that I've put together helpful for you. A lot of it is driven from a marketing perspective and ideas that I've come up with over the years from roaming around Silicon Valley and just helping various founders. And it's definitely been an interesting journey so far. Okay. All right, I'm just going to, yeah, it's been enough time now, so I'm just going to continue. Looks like we all know how to use the chat quite well. I'm going to minimize it though, so you're welcome to continue. And I'm going to end the poll, share the results for everyone. Okay, so we chose to name this meetup Proptech Revolution, and our goal is to help entrepreneurs and investors navigate the future of real estate. And hopefully this becomes a growing group. And if you haven't already joined our meetup, please do so. This helps us to stay in touch with you. But moving forward, you can also get access to a wider variety of opportunities if you want to check out ProVentures.org. That is the hosting organization for all of our meetups, with PropTech being a segment of ProVentures. And one of the easiest ways to stay in touch and get on our mailing list and find out about future events, both virtual and in person, mostly in San Francisco, then please go to ProVentures.org and click on the link that allows you to subscribe to our free newsletter. Okay, and so just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Jennifer Stowell, and I am the current president of ProVentures, and this has been part of my creation to hone a lot of the knowledge that I've gained over the years being in Silicon Valley and being all around the real estate industry in various capacities, and find a way to bring that knowledge forward, because there's been a decided lack of innovation overall. And there's been quite a few drawbacks that I think by giving presentations like this, hopefully we can help propel you forward in getting to your goal, whether that is just optimizing the prop tech space in general, or maybe you want to get to an exit. And I hope I can help in that journey somehow. In my background, I have been a realtor myself. I'm still currently a realtor member, and I have held the hands of many new agents and brokers on their journey of entrepreneurship, which is largely what real estate has always been. And some of those agents have stayed agents for many years, and that's their calling, and they stick that out. But there's been quite a few who have branched out into the prop tech space, and I have definitely enjoyed meeting with them and discussing their plans and helping connect them with the resources that they need in order to move forward. I also founded a real estate school designed to create licensees. I currently offer pre-licensed courses in 3 states, well, almost 3, North Carolina being the 3rd, but previously Florida and California. And we also offer exam prep for 21 states as well. So this has definitely given a great resource for prop tech founders, because I have quite a lot of new agents and new brokers launching their own brokerages that I interact with on a regular basis, which not only gives me insights about who you serve, but I can also help you with testing your product as well. Also on my LinkedIn page, which I shared my LinkedIn there, I recently in the new year began a newsletter, which I have been intent on publishing weekly, but more realistically, I think it's leaning towards monthly. And it's called Proptech Lead Prophecies. And I cover a wide array of information ranging from, just startup knowledge to reporting on companies who go public, and, the soon to be unicorns, or any of the exciting news, and sometimes give a little bit of an analysis of their technology or their market positioning. And then it gets a lot of attention. I've been quite surprised with the level of interaction that is received, just being so new, and PropTech has definitely gained a lot of traction just in recent years, which I'm happy to be serving in this space to help entrepreneurs in making better decisions and faster decisions. And so, going forward, I definitely have some information to share about what I've done personally to both invest and advise in technology that wasn't quite ready yet. And I would say virtual reality being one of them. Over 7 years ago, I got involved in helping launch a use case in the real estate industry for VR, and I was in the center of a lot of discussions, even on the national level with the realtors, and they had never even heard of VR at the time. And now it's, how could you not know what VR is? But it's a great example of how we use our time and our resources. Even though there could be an exciting innovation, sometimes the timing isn't there yet. And so how much of our effort that we decide to put forward really has to align with timing, and making sure that there's a supportive infrastructure already in existence for some of these innovations, no matter how great they could be, to actually have a chance at being successful. All right, so a lot of you are already quite familiar with real estate. I looked into some of your bios when you signed up, so I don't really need to get too deep here, but the four main verticals of real estate are residential, commercial, industrial, and land. And it's not uncommon for you to see industrial and land grouped under commercial. And this is for simplicity, because commercial, it usually just implies that there's cash flow versus something residential is more geared towards going to become somebody's home. And so to simplify things, when you're reading about PropTech or the news related to real estate, quite often you'll see industrial and land just grouped under commercial, and that should help quite a bit. Just going forward in the world right now, there was some 2020 research by Civils that I found compelling. I just wanted to share with you that does a great job at visually representing how relevant and how real estate is one of the wealthiest asset classes in existence by comparison to gold and our global GDP and debt securities and equities. So in this 2020 research, the real estate holds greater value than global equities and debt securities combined. And it's nearly 4 times the value of global GDP, second only to gold. And just due to its size, it's shocking that this industry has been slower than what can be expected to adopt some of these technological advancements that have been occurring. And there's an immense potential for growth. And we'll get into some of the reasons why this is the case in just a bit. But it's just amazing that something like smart contracts, which have been an idea for a long time and are now widely used in many other industries, aren't carrying over just yet to real estate, even though it seems like real estate would be a beautiful use case for smart contract technology in some way. So, just looking forward, I would definitely like to see companies who are attempting to streamline the transaction just from a smart contract perspective, and then somehow keeping the agent as the center focus with the smart contract is critical for it to actually get traction. And the recent emergence of PropTech offers a solution to about 2 decades of stagnation and innovation, which is a very general way of saying it. But not only, let's see, I want to say it was about 20 years ago, maybe in that range, there was no such thing as a multiple listing service where you could look up properties, let alone a marketplace such as Realtor.com and Zillow to give the consumer more insights to properties that are actively on the market and do their own comps and so on and so forth. So, prior to that, it was very closed off. You had to have a real estate license and you had to be a member of your local realtor association just to know the confidential information that is now becoming increasingly public knowledge. So, really from this point, agents are controlling the access and they're protecting some of the data, but there's been a huge shift in that data being more publicly accessible going forward. And there's a reason for this. Like anything, people are quite resistant to change, especially when it specifically and potentially attacks their way of making a living. And real estate for a long time now has been a commission-based model, and it rides on the assumption that You don't need to rewrite the wheel, and tomorrow is going to be the same as yesterday. And therefore, there's a decided lack of willingness to adopt some of these new methods, despite how great they may be. Also, you have some strict regulations, especially in the residential, the largest vertical, that have a serious present a serious limitation on some of the innovations as well. And then overall, real estate, especially the larger it is and the more diverse it is, you have some illiquidity challenges, which can make some of these advancements less attractive to certain investors and have less of a use case in the real estate space. And one of the reasons why there's such an adherence to more traditional methods overall, at least as of recently, I'm not saying that that's not going to change or on the horizon of changing, because I've seen it firsthand. I've interacted in a small group setting with a lot of billion-dollar company founders, and I've heard their stories and their journeys, and just I've seen the magic unfold, and it's a lot easier than I would have imagined, as long as they have distribution in place. But one of the reasons why you would find the industry leaning more towards tradition is because on the residential side especially, you have, of course, the strongest, largest trade organization in the United States, with over 1 million members pretty consistently over time. And it's also fueled by volunteers. So not only do you have all this active participation, but you have a lot of contributors to the Realtor Political Action Committee, which has a tremendous amount of influence, not only to help protect the industry itself, but at the forefront to ensure that consumers are protected, because the agents, of course, exist to help the consumers. So how strong our political action committee has been over the years, and seems to only be getting stronger with more contributors all the time, really makes this a tough industry to integrate with any type of innovation that might threaten the existence and relevancy of the professionals that it serves, and ultimately the consumers that they serve themselves. So ultimately, you call into question whether or not you're going to have a potentially wary customer right from the get-go, which you often do, because 9 times out of 10 a new technology comes up, and if your main deciders are the entire marketplace, which is realtors and the consumers, then the hesitation is something that you're going to need to overcome by doing a lot of good selling and a lot of great marketing. And if your product stands for itself and it gets enough word of mouth, then hopefully you don't have to spend as much time and resources to get the access that you need for distribution. But a lot of companies need it, and they turn ultimately to the local associations as a potential distribution, and this can present a lot of challenges, which we'll definitely talk about in a little bit. So we've already talked now for more than 5 minutes at least, maybe even 10, and we haven't even answered the question, what is PropTech? And PropTech is quite abstract still. It's not this nor that. As long as it's a technology or some kind of innovation that serves the real estate space, then it could be PropTech. And just thinking back about 5-6 years ago, when the discussion of PropTech really started occurring among VCs and just around Silicon Valley, a lot of the time the intention was to shrink the transaction costs in any way possible, and that's where they were most interested in investing. And then, of course, the word realty tech came up here and there, and they were going to bifurcate that into maybe just serving the practice of real estate versus prop tech maybe being something a little different. And then ultimately everyone decided that prop tech was the more trendy word. So now we have prop tech here forever. If you are trying to do something with realty tech, it may not really take, it may not take effect as much as prop tech. So just to be clear, we are prop tech. I've seen some ideas that were basically dead on arrival because they tried to take it to the realty tech side, and no one really thought that it made sense because we live in a world of prop tech. But prop tech is, pretty much anything that is technology related. You could be working on automating workflows. You could be going all the way to building your own online marketplace, which if that is something you're attempting to take on, I would certainly like to connect with you because, those marketplace creators have a huge upside. So now getting into, more what this ecosystem is looking like, with everything being some type of, part of an industry name. And now we're connecting it with the word tech. Prop tech and fintech have a huge overlap. And I think this overlap is only going to get wider as the digital transformation continues to occur, and especially as AI continues to become more prevalent. And this is, this diagram could look a lot different just in the next year with that space where it's real estate fintech there. I'd imagine the proportion of it being much wider in relation to everything else. But it's not limited to this. You could easily fill out quite a lot more areas to focus on. Smart real estate could be anything managing the actual real estate asset itself to improve management. Construction technology, Contech, that is anything that can improve the supply chain of construction so that we can actually build these homes and, maybe even more affordable homes in certain locations. And then, of course, the shared economy, which, is very broad here, but it could include tokenization of real estate as well. But really, we're shifting away from this old thinking that real estate was just this concept of selling and renting and building as a means to provide a roof over people's heads. And now we are in a new phase of thinking, which is how are we providing spaces that are not only roofs over people's heads, but they're dynamic, they're personalized, they're more efficient, they're possibly modular, and most of all, they are sensitive to how the space is actually being used and by whom. So just to give you an example, I had a great interaction with a new startup that was about 3 years ago. I want to say 4 years ago now. And I won't name them at this time, but their mission was to affordably 3D print ADUs, accessory dwelling units, as a way to resolve the housing, affordable housing matter, especially in California. And it's interesting that investor money was just given on this concept. They just were mentioning that they were resolving the issue of not having affordable housing, and then they're using 3D printers, so it must be a unicorn. Let's just give money to it. Well, that thinking is also another shift that we're not really seeing much anymore, but at the time it still was in effect. And come to find out, there was hardly any 3D printing going on at all. It was just maybe 10% of this entire ADU that I was able to walk around and walk inside. I sat down with the founders and had a meeting and just help discuss, their market positioning and how they can get more sales. And, it wasn't as easy as they thought it was going to be to, get someone thinking they could actually live in this creation that they had. And after being in it, I definitely would say that they needed to consult an architect, and they skipped that step. And architects are so undervalued in what they can do. And not only do they care how things look and how they're designed, but they really think about the human experience when they help others, add on to their homes or to build something from the ground up. So I think that was one of the critical missing pieces to this startup, is that they should have consulted an architect. All right, so just to touch on a couple success stories, maybe some of you have heard of a company called Side. They used to be called Reside, but now they're going by Side. And it's a great example of a company that is very unicorn, even though, a lot of the innovation was quite simple, and just about anyone who was thinking about moving from being an agent and opening up their own brokerage, which happens a lot, could have easily come up with a company like Side. It's nothing more than a white label model so that top agents could come up with their own brand and have all the tech supporting the management of the transaction behind them, so that they can be compliant with state regulations and maintaining documents for the required timeframes and so on. So they are worth billions now. And I remember meeting them when they were still pretty small. It was before they changed their name, and I was able to see a lot of the challenges that they had at the time. And they were quite resilient to a lot of the adherence to traditional ways of doing things. And they found the problem that other innovators just didn't really see quite clearly. And that was that the traditional brokers weren't quite supporting them in the way that they needed. They were already quite capable of doing so many things on their own, and they just couldn't take the time away from serving their clients in order to overcome some of the plateaus that someone with more tech savviness would be able to do. But they were great at selling. They were great at networking in their community. They were one of the most referred agents that ever to exist. And all of a sudden, Side comes in and they're like, hey, we have a way that you can build your own brand. You're already doing it. You might as well take a chance in this. And they converted quite a lot of top agents very quickly. And next thing you know, they are a multi-billion-dollar company. And let's see, let's go on to Landtech just very briefly here. Huge amount of tech in this company. It's amazing. They're based in Europe, and now they're in the US. They're raising a lot of money, and they are definitely on their way to being a unicorn when it comes to speeding up the acquisition, especially for developers. So anybody that wants to acquire large amounts of land and build on it, they found a way to streamline the due diligence and the collaboration process. They solved a big problem of jumping around to all these different platforms in various counties, which is so frustrating when you're just trying to look at an entire country or within one state, and you have so much you have to learn over and over again somebody's system that even though a lot of the functionality is the same, it was just a big problem. And that's how a lot of the real estate industry can be when you jump just from one place on the map to the next. Is it's a whole set of new learning that occurs. So they resolved that with their technology, and just within a few clicks, You can find zone codes, you can find development standards for just about any parcel, and it gives time back so you can focus on what really matters, which is identifying more opportunities and just getting to your next deal. So they're definitely on their way to being a unicorn as well. And then how can you even talk about PropTech and not mention Airbnb? I mean, Airbnb has been such a tremendous success. It was already successful pre-pandemic, but the pandemic even more so brought attention to Airbnb, just because naturally we had a revenge travel trend that made it much more relevant to lean into the Airbnb platform, because hotels were struggling. It was quite challenging times, and Airbnb superseded a lot of the challenges that hotels face, basically. And just looking back over a decade ago, when they first had their Series A, they were able to quickly raise about $7 million from different investors. And now they're in the mega billions. So just in like 13 years, they rose that quickly because they are a successful marketplace. They created a marketplace for short-term housing. All right, so this is probably the most important aspect of this presentation, and it's probably the one area that even if you choose to go into other industries, you could definitely reuse some of these points. And this is not a limited list by any means, but it's just something that I put together to help coach entrepreneurs from a marketing standpoint on how to avoid the common pitfalls of failed startups. And I won't go too deeply on all of them because I do want to hear some of your questions. But let's just start with over optimization, because I see this a lot. And sometimes, the failure is not necessarily in the fact that they just did too much of something, or, maybe there's some other aspects of this that the user experience is inferior to the competitors that are doing something similar, or maybe they're just coming up with a way to connect things that are being used by the companies they're about to serve, but those companies are quite capable of doing those integrations themselves. So that's a very, very common thing that you might want to think a little bit more about. Let's see what else. Distribution strategy. This is probably the most common pitfall of all time, unless your product is so incredible and it can stand for itself. It's changing so many people's lives for the better. It's ChatGPT, for instance. It doesn't necessarily need a whole lot of a distribution strategy in that case, but those are far and few between. And so many PropTech failures, or just startup failures in general, are because of a lack of distribution strategy. I can think of one in particular. I met someone at a startup networking event in Silicon Valley just before the pandemic. So going on 3-4 years ago. And this person, so amazing, like the kind of person you want to team up with, because they are a mover and a shaker. They have this natural way of seeing problems and coming up with solutions, putting together teams quickly. And this person was still in college pursuing an MBA, and came over to the Valley from another state and wanted to explore the startup world. And we came in contact with each other. And I also learned that they had just been licensed as a real estate agent, and they had closed a transaction that provided enough of a commission where they could handle hiring a few software developers. And so they went right into trying to innovate the property management aspect of PropTech, which, after learning a lot more about the plan and seeing how it unfolded, it was clear that there was no distribution strategy, most of all, but it was too cumbersome to have, to think that you could build something that resolve such a huge problem and then not really have distribution on top of it. So pretty much all of the money that they had initially was spent right away, and they didn't have much left over for marketing. Plus, when you actually looked at it, it lacked testing. There was already so many competitors that were coming into the market at that time trying to handle that same exact problem. So, that's another big issue, being outperformed by competitors. But then on the other hand, there's also a lot of prop tech that comes in where there's really no market need for it. And that's probably one of the saddest ones of all, because, why set up a lemonade stand if no one wants lemonade? Or, if your intended customer already has plenty of lemonade on tap, then, it really, your time could be used somewhere else, and your talent. But testing is so critical. There's so many amazing entrepreneurs. A lot of them are prior real estate agents, or they're currently still serving in the real estate industry, and they come up with these great ideas to make things easier for everybody, but they hardly do any testing, and it's mostly anecdotal, that they assume that just because they could use this type of innovation that it could benefit everybody, but they don't actually look further into the market itself and ask the questions to the right people. So just making sure you have a clear and genuine use case to justify the adoption of this innovation is it's everything. And then, of course, having a viable business model. I think that's a big challenge for a lot of companies in general, because, sometimes the innovation is great, but how are we going to monetize this? And, it's definitely a challenge. And then, of course, confusing pitches. Oh my gosh, for those of you who are here from San Francisco, and I'm sure you've had to see at least one pitch if not many, and that confusing pitches happen all the time. And it's definitely the case when PropTech goes to market as well, even though some of these founders are coming from strong selling backgrounds and, top producers even, they're now crossing over into a somewhat more challenging position for themselves, and their pitches can be quite confusing, or they realize their limitations as a sales professional once they do this. But everything has its learning experience. There are lucky few who come up with an idea and they hit the ground running, and they immediately monetize, it's successful, or someone finds pieces of it that are valuable, even though that wasn't the original intent. I can think of one example of someone who I interacted with in DC about a year ago during the legislative days. NAR decided to bring on their REACH program in the past couple of years, which brought a lot of these companies closer into their potential distribution. And this person I'm thinking of, absolutely brilliant in terms of helping resolve a major problem in the industry, which by doing so helps keep realtors more relevant. And when you think about it in the perspective of an investor, asking them what their deliverables are, you find that there are quite too few of them to really have any substantial value. So really all they have is an interesting way of rewriting the wheel, basically. And they come up with a different approach for the user experience just to take a script to convert leads online, and they did it effectively enough to have a few success stories. So then they have larger competitors that only use a small amount of that approach in the larger scheme of things, and those become their biggest customers, and they pay quite well just to find out what you're doing, and then they use some of that on their own. So there is a lot of controversy and criticism just in how you approach putting your product forward, and of course having the right kind of IP will help you there, but it still can be it's not always easy. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so of course there's going to be ethical limitations with anything involving privacy and data security, and this is probably one of the biggest issues in real estate, especially because, from the lending side, you are handling a lot of sensitive information, and, a lot of lenders obtain your bank information and even your social security number. And that can be quite challenging because, the systems that they implement are not always their own. They're often they're subscribing to these systems, and you're putting your information in a secure portal. And then sometimes these systems get acquired by other companies later on. And so, what's happening to your data? That's all I'm saying. And moving on from that, there's, of course, the idea of fairness, transparency, accessibility, inclusivity, regulatory compliance, and then, of course, environmental impact, which we don't want to overlook that, especially right now, because it's definitely trendy among investors. But of course, let's encourage strong security protocols and disclosures when we're putting forward our innovations, especially if you're going to be storing large amounts of personal data. And of course, that goes for any industry, but transparency, fairness, just designing it with accessibility in mind, and the different limitations of your users is, if you can prevent bias and discrimination, that would be great. I know there's challenges in AI. Hopefully they get resolved on their own, but that's going to be a big challenge as well. Also, just different languages. AI can help with that, with easy conversions. So AI is our biggest paradox of all of this. If I could just sum this up, it's going to resolve a lot of these problems, but at the same time, it's not. It may actually perpetuate these problems too. So that could be a whole nother topic in itself. If anybody out there has experience or insights with AI in PropTech, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about that. And then, of course, regulatory compliance, especially if you are dealing in the residential sector, you're going to encounter a lot of limitations in involving regulatory compliance that just be aware of it and make sure you have a good attorney that can help make this easier for you and have all the proper disclosures handy to protect the consumer. And then we're not going to underestimate the environmental impact, because this is definitely on the top of the minds of a lot of investors going into this new year. And if your company or your PropTech innovation can reduce carbon emissions in some kind of way, then you definitely want to push that value forward, because it could very well increase your likelihood of getting investment. For instance, virtual property tours, great example, reduces the need for physical travel, and that can therefore reduce carbon emissions. So any company out there who is pushing, the feasibility of virtual property tours, or, even just a company like Matterport. That's a really great point about how they're helping to resolve some of these issues with actually going to properties in person anymore. All right, so let's start to wrap up the state of PropTech, and I just want to mention that probably the number one question among both new agents and seasoned professionals is whether or not realtors are going to be replaced by tech in some way, even though that has been the vocalized goal for a lot of the investors out there, which makes me cringe a little bit, because I love realtors, I love agents. I think that they are extremely important to society and what they do and how they function. But I don't think they're going to be replaced anytime soon by machines. And all of this technology so far seems to be helping make their jobs easier to serve the consumer and protect the consumer and streamline the process and so on. So it's just too complicated, especially on the residential side. Emotional factors have a lot more value than what most people realize. And that drives a lot of the sales, and it helps uplift a lot of the values when we're in times of high activity. And, sometimes the goals of the technology that comes in to try to do it all is actually potentially going to deteriorate property values. And it's usually quite obvious to see that right away. So let's see, and then the attitudinal barriers that exist for realtors as well. I mean, just think about some of these companies that come they get adopted by the local MLS, and they serve as a more convenient way for us to schedule showings and to calendar those showings for everybody. And say they don't hold up to their promises. And then you come in as a new company that, no matter what you do, even if you don't even serve the same capacity in any way, you're just a tech company coming in brand new. And just because somebody else's service agreement was not fulfilled according to their initial expectations and what was promised, that can put you in a reactive state right out the gate, because they provided that subpar service. And then all of that is talked about at all of the board meetings and within all the brokerages. Every agent is vocalizing their frustration with this new technology that's not working the way it should. And then they want to go back to the old system. And, it's very, very common and has been for a while. So just anticipate that, so that maybe you can be welcomed faster just by providing a sound user or a service agreement for your users. And the last thing I want to mention from here is probably your explainer videos being, more focused on getting action to be taken right away. Sometimes just getting an appointment is a nice trial close, if you want to look at it that way. But there's a lot of great systems and tools out there that should have already been adopted by now, but they just aren't, because it's not easy to explain what it is they're doing. And the main thing is to answer 2 key questions. And one of them is, how big or what is this problem you're solving? So define that problem as quickly and as soon as possible. And then the other question would be, why are you or why is your solution the best for solving that problem? Okay, and we're about to wrap up, but I just wanted to reiterate one more thing about getting investment, because long gone are the days where you could just build it and they will come. And I know this goes back and forth a little bit with who drives the innovation between the investors and the entrepreneurs, but I think going forward, it's been decided that that you're not just going to get investment because you have a great idea. There's going to be a lot more criteria that needs to be met before that will happen. And also it's just very circumstantial. So if you are an example of a company that was funded just because, even though you haven't even monetized yet, there's probably another reason for it, and it's definitely not the rule, it's more the exception. And so just working with me, I would definitely want to hear more from the Proptech companies. And as the Proptech lead, I have some criteria for engagement potentially. And here I list just a few things. A strong team, of course, with great founders, especially with a prior track record and experience in the startup space, would be ideal. Having some kind of business model, it doesn't even need to be compelling, but it'd be great if it was. Just having at least explored what your business model could look like is better than what we see a lot with most startups. So just having something and showing market potential, showing that you've actually tested your potential users, or you have user acquisition on your platform, and showing traction is a good thing. And then of course a good user experience. I know I think we have at least one person here that's on the design side of the user experience, and it's so critical. And someone like you're serving such a huge value. You may not even know how much value you serve, because that front end experience, and that's not to say that those that support the backside of the technology aren't as valuable. It's all valuable. It's just that what that user experience is it can make or break you. All right, to that end, thank you all for staying so long. And I just wanted to reiterate that ProVentures is here to help elevate entrepreneurs, and definitely interested in talking with you more if you have recommendations for potential speakers, or you are one yourself and you'd like to help align with the right audience, and you're seeking collaboration, or you need additional resources or support of any kind. This is our general team email for now that you can jot down and get in touch that way. And of course, please visit our website and subscribe to our free newsletter so that you can find out about all of our events, not just the ones we post on Meetup, but the ones that we host live and in person, mostly around Silicon Valley. And then lastly, my email's here and my LinkedIn page. You're more than welcome to reach out and get in touch with me. And let's see, questions. Does anybody have any questions for me or comments about anything before we sign off? I know it's probably getting late now, but anyone? Okay, looks like we have some in the chat here. Do you see any need to change a long-term rental residential market to make it more efficient and easier for tenants and landlords? Something similar to Airbnb did for short-term rental. Yes, of course. And I I might need some more details here if you had an idea in mind, but yeah, there's definitely a need to change that landscape and make it easier. And there's a lot out there already. So if you're thinking about doing this or you're already implementing your plans, there's a lot of attention already on this specific aspect of prop tech. So you're not going to be alone. And more than likely, a lot of the ideas that you've thought of, somebody else already has. So there's going to be more pressure for you to get funding as early as possible and to come up with your unique way of bringing it forward in the market. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to end it at that point. I hope that you at least got something out of this, and I hope to see you again. Please feel free to reach out to me if you think of something later that you might want to ask. And I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. I'll let you get back to your evening, and I hope the rest of your week goes extremely well and productive.